The desert air of the Atacama is a dry and razor-thin veil, a transparent skin stretched over the skeletal peaks of the Andes. Here, at the summit of Cerro Pachon, the wind does not speak, it only erodes. In the deep sapphire hours of the night, the world below dissolves into an ocean of shadows, leaving only the peaks to commune with the abyss above. This is the realm of the Vera Rubin Observatory, a colossal eye of glass and steel, peerless and indifferent. It is a machine designed to map the invisible, to catalogue the moving parts of the night sky with a precision that borders on the divine. The year is 2027. While the civilizations of the third planet from the Sun go about their brief and frantic labours, the observatory remains a silent witness to a reality that does not acknowledge their existence. It is here that the first flicker of the ghost in the machine is detected, a minute deviation in the expected flow of the cosmic stream that signals the end of the long peace. The universe is not a garden, though we have long sought to see it as one. It is a mechanism of terrifying scale, a clockwork of gravity and inertia, where every gear is a star and every spring is the tension of the void. For 4,500,000,000 years, the solar system has operated with the rhythmic stability of a well-oiled engine. The planets trace their elliptical paths with a mathematical purity that has allowed life to believe in the permanence of its sanctuary. We have lived in the brief window of a planetary equilibrium, a momentary pause in the chaotic history of the cosmos. But the machine is vast, and we are not its architects. We are merely the dust that has settled upon the gears, momentarily spared from the grinding teeth of celestial motion. The data arrives not as a scream, but as a series of cold, unblinking digits processed by an automated sentinel. In the early hours of a Tuesday in October, the telescope captures a streak of light so faint it would be invisible to any eye but this one. The software, an intricate web of logic and light, identifies the object and assigns it a designation that will soon be etched into the memory of a dying species: 3I Atlas. It is a hyperbolic interloper, a traveller from the galactic north, descending into the plane of the ecliptic with a velocity that defies the sun's ability to capture it. But unlike the small, jagged shards of interstellar rock that preceded it in decades past, this visitor possesses a mass that staggers the imagination. It is a moon-sized monolith of ice and silicate, a dark, unfeeling titan emerging from the primordial gloom of the interstellar void. As the computers of the observatory refine the trajectory, a chilling truth begins to unravel the perceived order of the world. The intruder is not merely passing through the outskirts of our domain. Its path is a direct incision into the heart of the solar system. The cold geometry of its hyperbolic arc indicates a close approach to the inner planets, a gravitational handshake that will send ripples through the delicate architecture of our home. The Vera Rubin Observatory, in its mechanical purity, does not feel fear. It only records the friction. It watches as the great clock of the heavens begins to shudder, the first note of discord in a symphony that has played for eons. The arrival of 3I Atlas is the introduction of a new input into the system, a ghost in the gears that the mechanism of gravity must now account for with ruthless logic. The silence of the Chilean night is deceptive. In the digital archives of the observatory, a catastrophe is already unfolding in the language of mathematics. The arrival of this uninvited guest marks the beginning of the reckoning, the moment when the illusion of permanent sanctuary is shattered by the inexorable motion of the stars. We have spent centuries gazing at the heavens, seeking meaning or companionship, but 3I Atlas offers only the cold truth of our planetary vulnerability. It is a remnant of a distant epoch, a wanderer that has crossed the abyss for millions of years, indifferent to the life that has blossomed in this tiny corner of the cosmos. To this intruder, Earth is not a jewel. It is merely a mass in its path, a minor variable in a calculation of momentum and mass. The mechanism of the universe is grinding, and the gears are shifting. As the news of the detection spreads from the quiet peaks of the Andes to the bustling laboratories of the world, a sense of melancholic realization begins to take hold. The watchmaker is blind, and the universe does not blink. The discovery of Three-Eye Atlas is the first phase of the unravelling, the point at which the clockwork celestial order is disrupted by the silent arrival of chaos. The observatory, acting as the sentinel of our collective fragility, continues to track the object with an unfeeling mechanical pulse. It sees the way the intruder's shadow falls across the outer reaches of the Kuiper Belt, a premonition of the darkness that is to come. We are entering a new epoch, one defined not by the growth of civilizations, but by the mechanical certainty of change. The great clock is breaking, or perhaps it is merely moving to a new rhythm, one that does not include the survival of the fragile organisms that have called this system home. The void is no longer a distant abstraction. It has become active, an abyss that is reaching back into the light. The arrival of Three-Eye Atlas is the first note of a cosmic funeral dirge, a reminder that the architecture of the cosmos is built upon the ruins of previous catastrophes. Every atom in our bodies was forged in the death of a star, and now the mechanism that created us is preparing to devour the order it once sustained. The Vera Rubin Observatory remains a cold and lonely outpost, a monument to the human desire to witness our own end. It stands as a witness to the void, a machine looking at a machine, documenting the precise moment when the gears of destiny began to slip. There is no moral compass in the stars, no mercy in the mathematics of a hyperbolic trajectory. There is only the inexorable logic of the path, the cold calculation of the encounter, and the vast eternal silence of the abyss. As the first phase of the cosmic unravelling completes, the story of the future begins to be written in the language of light and shadows. The old order is ending, and the new celestial reality is one of friction and dissolution. The clock is ticking, the gears are shifting, and the universe, in its majestic and terrifying indifference, continues its silent rotation toward the end of all things. The journey into the heart of the machine has begun, and the first chapter of the history of the future is a record of the moment the lights began to fail. In the frozen heights of the Andes, the machine watches the intruder, and the intruder moves on, driven by the same primordial laws that govern the birth and death of galaxies. The ghost in the machine has been revealed, and the mechanism of fate is set in motion. The stars are cold and bright. The void is all that remains, and the long night is finally here. To understand the magnitude of the dissolution that follows, we must first comprehend the profound, mathematical silence that preceded it. For 4,500,000,000 years, the solar system has existed as a masterpiece of celestial mechanics, a closed circuit of such staggering regularity that we mistook it for eternity. This is the era of the Great Clockwork, a period where the orbits of the planets were not merely paths through the void, but the grooves of a cosmic record playing a symphony of stability. We were born into the golden age of the machine, a time when the gears of gravity were so perfectly aligned that the very notion of a sunset became a symbol of reliability rather than a countdown to oblivion. This celestial architecture was forged in the fires of the primordial disk, a chaotic swirl of gas and dust that eventually settled into the cold beauty of mathematical equilibrium. The 900 million miles of vacuum between the Sun and the outer reaches were not empty, but filled with the invisible iron-clad laws of orbital resonance. Each planet, from the scorched shell of Mercury to the frozen remnants of the Kuiper Belt, found its place in a delicate tapestry of motion. This was the Newtonian ideal realised, a system where every mass accounted for every other mass, a billion-year dance where no one missed a step. We looked up at the night sky and saw a sanctuary, unaware that we were living inside a mechanism of such precarious balance that even a minor variable could cause the entire structure to unravel. The soul of this machine was gravity, a force we perceived as a protective embrace. We built our civilizations on the predictability of the seasons, our religions on the recurring positions of the stars, and our science on the unshakable logic of the spheres. We believed the solar system was a permanent sanctuary, a fortress of order protected from the chaotic whims of the interstellar abyss. The ecliptic plane, that flat disk where the planets reside, was our horizon of safety. For eons, the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars, enjoyed a long peace, shielded from the violence of the deep cosmos by the twin sentinels of the outer system. The most vital gear in this great machine was Jupiter. To the ancient observers, it was a wandering light. To the cold logic of the mechanism, it was the celestial vacuum cleaner, the great protector. Its massive gravitational well acted as a barrier, a sentinel that caught the wandering debris of the void and cast it into the sun or out into the dark. For 4 billion years, Jupiter stood guard, ensuring that the inner sanctuary remained undisturbed. It was the heavy weight in the pendulum of the clock, providing the tension necessary for the rhythms of life to take hold. Without the mechanical perfection of this arrangement, the fragile incubation of life on Earth would have been extinguished in its infancy by the relentless bombardment of the primordial remnants. But this stability was always an illusion, a temporary state of grace in a universe defined by entropy. We lived in the calm before the interstellar storm, a brief epoch of irregularity that allowed us to forget the true nature of the cosmos. The universe is not a garden, it is a ruthless machine, and the solar system is merely one of its smaller temporary components. The precision of a Swiss timepiece is no match for the inexorable decay of time. We viewed the orbits as circular logic, a guarantee that what has been will always be. We trusted the mathematics of the great clockwork because it had never failed us. The sunrise was not a promise, but a momentum, the result of a rotation that had continued for more than 1 trillion days. Yet the very rigidity that gave us life also ensured our vulnerability. A clockwork system is beautiful until it encounters friction. It is a system built on the assumption of a closed circuit, where every mass is accounted for and every trajectory is known. When 3i Atlas was detected, it was not just a celestial body entering our neighbourhood, it was a foreign object being thrust into the gears of a delicate engine. The intruder represents the return of the chaotic primordial state, a reminder that the long era of celestial harmony was an anomaly, a fluke of history in a cosmos that trends toward the abyss. The mechanics of the ecliptic plane began to feel the subtle tension of this new presence, long before the intruder reached the inner system. Gravity is a long-range force, a silent thread that connects all things across the vastness. Even as 3i Atlas moved through the outer dark, its mass began to tug at the delicate orbital alignments that had held for 4 billion years. The great machine, which had functioned with such precision for eons, began to experience the first tremors of a catastrophic shift. The cold beauty of mathematical equilibrium was being replaced by the jagged logic of a hyperbolic trajectory, a path that does not belong to our clockwork world. Human civilization is a product of this regularity. Our entire history is a footnote to the stability of the Earth's orbit. We learned to plant when the tilt of the axis brought the sun closer, and we learned to harvest when the gears turned toward the dark. Our art, our philosophy, and our very consciousness are rooted in the dependency on a predictable mechanism. We are the children of the clockwork, organisms that evolved to fit the rhythms of a system that we believed was eternal. To imagine the end of this order is to imagine the end of the foundation of our existence. As the intruder approaches, the philosophy of the clockwork universe begins to fail us. We realize that the protective hand of Jupiter and the regular pulses of the sun were never meant for us. They were simply the state of the machine. The universe does not care for the sanctuary it created. It is an unfeeling engine, and we are the unintended byproduct of its gears. The impending chaos is not a tragedy in the eyes of the cosmos. It is merely a reconfiguration of mass and energy. The great clock is not breaking because it is flawed. It is breaking because it is being superseded by a larger, more violent reality. The stage is now set for the transition from the old order to the new epoch of dissolution. The machine is still whole, but the symmetry of the past is fading. The silent operation of the great machine continues, but the music has changed. There is a new note in the symphony, a discordant hum that signals the arrival of the abyss. We are standing at the threshold of the void, looking back at the 4 billion years of peace with a sense of melancholic realization. The architecture of existence, which once felt so solid and unshakable, is revealed to be as fragile as a web of glass. The sentinel at the observatory continues to watch, documenting the precise moment when the gears of the solar system begin to slip. The long silence of the eons is being replaced by the friction of the encounter. The mechanical integrity of the system is failing, and the preparation for the coming disruption is complete. The great clock is winding down, and the intruder is the key that will turn the mechanism in a direction it was never meant to go. We are the witnesses to the final ticks of the ancient clock, the last observers of a world defined by the grace of mathematical certainty. The void is calling, the gears are shifting, and the era of predictability is over. The long night of the machine has begun. The intruder, designated 3i Atlas, arrived not as a guest, but as a fundamental disruption to the established order of the local dark. It descended from the galactic north, a region of the celestial sphere that has long stood as a silent witness to the rotation of our sun. This object did not drift. It lunged. Its velocity was measured at a staggering 110 kilometers per second, a speed so immense that it exists outside the governing logic of our solar system. To the planets that have circled the sun in a predictable circular dance for 4,500,000,000 years, such a speed is an impossibility, a violation of the local peace. This is the hyperbolic excess velocity of a traveller that the sun's gravity cannot hope to tether. It is a projectile fired from the deep space abyss, a bullet moving through the delicate clockwork of our home. In the brief history of our astronomical awareness, we have seen others like it, though they were but shadows compared to the substance of Atlas. We remember the names Oumuamua and Borisov, the first recognised messengers from the interstellar void. They were small, fleet, and elusive, mere remnants of distant star systems that pass through our neighbourhood like ghosts in the night. 3i Atlas is a different kind of entity. It is a moon-sized mass of ancient rock and frozen volatile elements, a gargantuan sentinel that carries with it the kinetic energy of a world. Its physical scale transforms it from a curiosity into a catastrophe. While its predecessors were pebbles cast into a pond, Atlas is a boulder dropped into a watch mechanism. The Pan-Stars array, our collective eye turned toward the eternal night, was the first to capture the anomaly. The data did not arrive as a sudden flare, but as a cold mathematical certainty. The pixels on the screen, translated into coordinates and vectors, revealed a path that did not close in an ellipse. It was a hyperbola, a curve that opens into the infinite, signifying an origin far beyond the reach of our sun. The history of this interloper is a testament to the ruthless machine of the cosmos. Eons ago, in a corner of the galaxy defined by the violent intersection of gravity and heat, Atlas was born within a hyperdense binary star system. In such a place, two suns revolve around one another in a terminal embrace, creating a chaotic gravitational field that acts as a celestial catapult. Through a mechanical alignment of orbits that occurs only once in a billion years, Atlas was stripped from its parent stars and flung into the void. This was not an act of malice, but of pure kinematics. The universe does not care for the fate of the masses it creates. It simply follows the inexorable laws of motion. For millions of years, the object travelled through the interstellar dark, a cold and silent remnant of a forgotten system. It crossed the vast gulfs between the stars, a journey through the eons where time and distance lose their meaning. It was a machine in motion, powered by the momentum of its birth, destined to encounter our system only by the cold chance of geometry. The physics of this encounter are defined by the mathematical purity of high velocity. As Atlas enters the space dominated by our sun, the local gravity attempts to bend its path, to draw it into the familiar fold of the planetary family. But the intruder is moving too fast. Its kinetic energy is so great that the sun's reach is insufficient to claim it. Instead of being captured, the intruder acts as a disruptive factor, an external force acting upon the closed circuit of our world. The momentum of a moon-sized object moving at 110 kilometers per second is a force that defies easy metaphor. It is the weight of a world combined with the speed of a lightning bolt. This is the mechanical logic of the trajectory. The intruder does not acknowledge the sanctuary of the solar system. It only recognizes the friction of gravitational potential. The scientists who watch from the surface of the Earth see the intruder through the lens of cold calculation. To them, Atlas is a mathematical anomaly that must be solved. They measure its mass, they plot its vector, and they realize with a sense of melancholic realization that the isolation of our system has ended. The Great Clock is no longer a closed system. The arrival of 3I Atlas is the first intersection of the interstellar and the local, a moment where the ancient history of a distant star system meets the current epoch of our own. The indifference of the void to the origin of the object is reflected in the indifference of the object to our survival. It is a high-velocity ghost in the gears, a physical force that is beginning to exert its influence on the Jovian system. Jupiter, the great protector, the massive sentinel that has long cleared the path for the inner planets, now faces an opponent of comparable scale and superior speed. The mechanical tension of the approaching encounter is felt in the subtle shifts of the orbital data. The gravity of Atlas is already beginning to tug at the outer moons, a precursor to the friction that will soon define the encounter. The science of interstellar migration suggests that such events are rare, yet in the vast timeline of the cosmos, they are inevitable. We are witnessing the breakdown of the mechanical integrity of our system. The long night of the machine has reached a turning point where the internal rhythms are being superseded by a larger, more violent reality. There is a certain beauty in the mathematical certainty of the disaster. The trajectory of Atlas toward the Jovian system is a masterpiece of geometry, a line drawn through the dark that connects two disparate parts of the galaxy. It is the beginning of the contact, the moment when the outside world finally breaks through the wall of our 4 billion-year solitude. The intruder is a symbol of the unfeeling engine of the universe, a mass that moves because it was moved, a force that will strike because it must. The calculations of the astronomers are the final ticks of the ancient clock, the last moments of a world that believed in the permanence of its own architecture. The void is no longer a distant concept. It has taken physical form and is moving through the gates of our home. As the intruder deepens its penetration into the solar system, the coldness of its composition and the indifference of its path become the defining characteristics of the age. We are no longer the masters of a predictable machine. We are the observers of a collision between the local and the infinite. The kinetic reality of the encounter is a reminder that the universe is not a garden, but a vast and unfeeling mechanism of mass and energy. The speed that defies capture is the signature of the abyss, and the path of the interloper is the scar it leaves upon the tapestry of our sky. The encounter has begun, and the mechanical logic of the void will now dictate the future of the Great Clock. We stand at the edge of the abyss watching the intruder move through the dark, a cold machine meeting the world it was never meant to know. The massive sentinel of our system, the gas giant Jupiter, has reigned for 4 billion years as the undisputed master of the middle heavens. It is the great regulator, a gravitational anchor that has historically swept the path clear for the fragile inner worlds. But as 3I Atlas plunges deeper into our celestial architecture, this ancient protector meets a force that does not obey the local laws of the solar family. The intruder passes within 1/2 of an astronomical unit of Jupiter, a distance that, in the vastness of the abyss, is a mere breath. This is the moment of the great perturbation, the first significant grinding of the celestial gears that have turned in near-perfect harmony since the dawn of the primordial sun. The encounter is not a collision of rock and gas, but a violent exchange of invisible influence. It is a tug of war between two masses, a cold and mathematical struggle where the prize is the stability of the entire system. In the realm of classical mechanics, we often imagine the orbits of planets as permanent tracks laid down in the vacuum. We view the solar system as a grand clock, a machine of such precision that its future can be calculated for 1,000 lifetimes. But the arrival of 3I Atlas introduces the chaos of the three-body problem, a mathematical nightmare where the interaction between the Sun, Jupiter, and the visitor becomes an unsolvable equation of shifting vectors. As the intruder nears the giant, the gravity of Atlas begins to pull at the very fabric of Jupiter's path. There is no friction in the void to dampen this influence, no atmosphere to soften the blow. There is only the inexorable logic of mass and distance, the kinetic energy of the visitor, born in the heart of a distant and forgotten star system, is now being traded for the orbital energy of our largest planet. The consequences of this near miss are subtle at first, yet they represent the first major failure of the Great Clock. As Atlas passes, the eccentricity of Jupiter's orbit shifts by 0.01%. In the short term of a human life, such a change is imperceptible, a rounding error in a ledger of infinite ruse. But in the long history of the cosmos, a shift of this magnitude is a catastrophe. The perfect circle begins to stretch into an ellipse. The cadence of the giant is broken. This is the first ripple in the tapestry, a tiny tear that will, over the coming eons, begin to unravel the symmetry of the outer solar system. The machine is no longer calibrated to the rhythm of the sun alone. It has been touched by the hand of the void, and its internal logic has been forever altered. Beneath the swirling clouds of the Jovian atmosphere, the impact of the perturbation is felt in the mechanical tension of the moons. The Galilean satellites, those four great worlds of ice and fire, have danced in a resonant symphony for billions of years. Io, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto are locked in a gravitational embrace that maintains their tides and their heat. But as Atlas passes, its gravity reaches out like a phantom hand, plucking at the strings of this lunar orchestra. The delicate balance of their orbits is disrupted. The tidal stresses within Io intensify, the friction of its shifting crust generating a heat that defies the cold of the abyss. Europa's hidden oceans feel the pull of a new master, a momentary distortion that sends cracks through its frozen shell. The transfer of momentum is a ruthless process. For Atlas to maintain its trajectory, it must steal a fraction of the system's order, leaving behind a wake of gravitational discord. This is the cold reality of the N-body simulation. We are witnessing the displacement of the largest planetary mass in our neighbourhood, a shift in the centre of mass for the entire solar system. As Jupiter is nudged, the Sun itself experiences a minute wobble, a shudder in the heart of the machine. The interaction between Jupiter and Saturn, the two great gears that have long stabilised one another, is subtly compromised. The resonance that has kept the gas giants in their place for an epoch is beginning to slip. It is the first evidence of systemic failure, a reminder that the universe does not care for the longevity of our arrangements. The intruder is not a conscious entity, yet its presence acts as a catalyst for a chain reaction that will eventually reach the inner worlds, where life clings to the warmth of the star. We often speak of the cosmos as a symphony, a beautiful and harmonious arrangement of spheres. But the science of this encounter reveals a different truth. The universe is a ruthless machine, and gravity is its most indifferent tool. The tug-of-war between the native giant and the interstellar visitor is a demonstration of pure physics, stripped of any concern for the preservation of the status quo. The transfer of kinetic energy into orbital energy is a transaction made in the dark, a cold calculation where the stability of a planetary system is traded for the continued flight of a lonely probe from the abyss. The Great Clock is grinding its teeth. The friction between the local and the infinite is producing a heat that we are only now beginning to measure in the erratic data of our telescopes. As the intruder begins to pull away from the Jovian system, the magnitude of the disruption becomes clear. The path of 3i Atlas has been bent by the encounter, but the cost to our home is far greater. We are left with a system that is no longer in equilibrium. The sentinel has been moved, the great gear has slipped. We are entering a new epoch of uncertainty, where the predictable rhythms of the past are replaced by the unfolding chaos of the future. The silent sentinel of the outer dark has failed in its duty to remain unchanged. The abyss has reached into our sanctuary and left its mark, a subtle nudge that changes everything. We are the witnesses to this transition, the observers of a mechanism that is beginning to fail. the melancholic optimism of our position lies in the realization that we can perceive this change, we can map the vectors, we can calculate the decay, and we can understand the inexorable logic of the machine. Even as the symmetry of our world begins to dissolve, our consciousness remains the one part of the system that can reflect upon the catastrophe. The void is vast and unfeeling, and the gravity of the intruder is a force of pure oblivion, but the mathematics of the disruption are a testament to the order that once was. We stand on the precipice of a new and unstable history, watching the great clock lose its beat, knowing that the symphony of the spheres is being replaced by the silent, cold grinding of a machine that has finally met a force it cannot master. The encounter with Jupiter was the first major step in the global destabilization of our home, a mechanical consequence that will echo through the eons, long after the intruder has returned to the eternal dark of the interstellar void. The great clock of the solar system, a mechanism that has functioned with the precision of a master timepiece for billions of years, is beginning to experience a fundamental mechanical failure. For eons, the stability of our local cosmos has rested upon a silent, invisible architecture of gravity, a mathematical bond known as the mean motion resonance. At the heart of this architecture lies the relationship between the two most massive gears in the machine, Jupiter and Saturn. This is the 5:2 ratio, a celestial harmony where for every 5 circuits the king of planets completes around the Sun, the ringed giant completes exactly 2. This ratio is not merely a curious numerical coincidence, it is the structural anchor that prevents the inner system from descending into the abyss of chaos. But as the intruder, 3i Atlas, retreats into the void, it leaves behind a wake of gravitational discord that the system cannot rectify. The subtle nudge to Jupiter has altered its velocity by a fraction so small it would be invisible to anything but the most precise instruments. Yet in the cold logic of celestial mechanics, this fraction is a catastrophe. The 5:2 resonance, the very pulse of our planetary arrangement, is beginning to unravel. The gears are no longer teeth to groove, they are grinding against one another, sending tremors through the fabric of the entire system. This is the science of resonance destabilization, a process where the rhythmic energy that once maintained order is now being channeled into a destructive pumping mechanism. The physics of this unraveling are as inexorable as they are terrifying. In a stable system, the planets periodically align, their mutual tugs balancing out over vast stretches of time. However, when the ratio slips, these tugs no longer cancel each other. Instead, they begin to reinforce one another in a feedback loop of instability. Imagine a child on a swing being pushed at exactly the wrong moment. Rather than maintaining a steady arc, the motion becomes erratic, the energy building until the movement is no longer sustainable. This is the pumping of the orbits. Jupiter and Saturn, the massive guardians of the outer dark, are now acting as a dual engine of disruption, their shifting gravitational influence radiating inward toward the smaller, more fragile cogs of the machine. The inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, are the first to feel the mechanical stress of this systemic failure. We often think of our world as an independent entity, a sanctuary insulated from the vastness of the abyss. But the reality of the cosmos is one of total interconnectedness. We are a small gear connected to the giant wheels of the outer dark by the invisible chains of gravity. As the orbits of the gas giants begin to shift, the semi-major axis of the Earth's path around the Sun begins to fluctuate. It is a subtle elongation at first, a change of mere thousands of kilometers in a journey of hundreds of millions. To a human observer, the Sun might look no different, but the mathematics of our climate are sensitive to the smallest of variables. The Earth is being pulled. The inexorable logic of the mathematical ratio is dictating a new, more eccentric path for our world. The circle is becoming an ellipse. This shift in eccentricity is the beginning of the end for the seasonal stability that allowed our species to flourish. The seasons are no longer governed by the predictable tilt of the axis alone. They are now subject to the varying distance between our world and its life-giving star. We are witnessing the breakdown of the long-term stability of the Holocene. replaced by the chaotic fluctuations of a machine that has lost its timing. The terrestrial world is being subjected to an increase in solar radiation flux at certain points in its orbit, followed by a terrifying retreat into the cold dark. This is not a change that can be halted by human intervention. We cannot argue with the laws of motion. We cannot plead with the void. The disruption extends beyond our own world to the Red Sentinel, Mars, and the ancient debris of the asteroid belt. The belt, a collection of primordial remnants from the birth of the system, is held in place by the gravitational influence of Jupiter. As the resonance with Saturn fails, the gaps in the belt, regions of stability and instability, begin to shift. Asteroids that have remained in silent, predictable paths for millions of years are suddenly nudged onto new inward trajectories. The clockwork is becoming a chaos engine, hurling the shrapnel of the early solar system toward the inner worlds. The mechanical persistence of this change ensures that there is no return to the previous epoch. The alteration of the orbital paths is permanent. The cold truth of the orbital ratios is that they are the only thing standing between our world and the oblivion of the deep. The mathematical purity of the discord we now observe is a testament to the fragility of the arrangement. We have lived in a brief window of celestial harmony, a fluke of timing in the eternal history of the universe. Now, the great gears are failing. The tension of the failing harmony is visible in the subtle wobbles of the planets, a celestial shivering that signals the approach of a much larger catastrophe. The science of orbital evolution tells us that once a system enters this phase of systemic failure, the transition to a new, often more hostile state is rapid in the scale of cosmic time. The Earth, once a jewel of stability, is now just a cog in a failing machine. We are seeing the mechanical consequences for habitability. The delicate balance of our atmosphere, the predictable cycles of our oceans, and the very rhythm of life are all tethered to the mathematical certainty of our orbit. As that certainty dissolves, so too does the security of our existence. We are the witnesses to the unravelling. We are the observers of the discord of the spheres. The great clock is losing its beat, and we are the passengers on a world that is being slowly, inexorably pushed out into the unknown. There is a certain melancholic majesty in this realization. We are small, carbon-based fragments of the universe that have developed the capacity to understand the very laws that are now orchestrating our undoing. We can map the vectors of our destruction. We can calculate the exact moment when the resonance will finally break, casting the planets into an epoch of chaos. The machine is cold, unfeeling, and indifferent to our presence. Yet the fact that we can perceive its inner workings provides a thin sliver of transcendence. We are the consciousness of the cosmos, reflecting upon its own mechanical decay. The encounter with 3i Atlas was the catalyst, but the failure was always a latent possibility in the mathematics of our system. The universe does not promise permanence. The tapestry of the heavens is constantly being rewoven, often at the cost of the patterns that came before. As the giant gears of Jupiter and Saturn continue to grind, the solar system moves further away from the order of the past and closer to a future defined by the silent, cold reality of shifting orbits. The abyss has reached in, the sentinel has moved, and the mechanical breakdown of the solar harmony has begun. We are entering the era of the chaos engine, where the only certainty is the inexorable logic of the unravelling. The tilt is not merely a change in perspective, but a fundamental realignment of the mechanical destiny of our solar system. As the interloper, 3i Atlas, carves its path through the ecliptic at an angle of nearly 60 degrees, it introduces a lethal geometry to a system that has known only the flat, rhythmic rotation of the planets for 4,500,000,000 years. This is no longer a clockwork of concentric circles. The intruder has brought with it a three-dimensional disruption, a spatial arrogance that forces the existing inhabitants of our system to reckon with a new and terrifying mathematics. At the heart of this disruption lies the Kozai lead-off mechanism, a cold and inexorable law of celestial dynamics that dictates the exchange of one form of orbital energy for another. In the silent logic of the cosmos, the inclination of an orbit and its eccentricity are not independent variables, but two sides of a singular mechanical coin. As the gravitational influence of 3i Atlas tugs at the small bodies of the main belt, it initiates a trade that cannot be rescinded. The mechanism forces a reduction in the inclination of an asteroid's orbit in exchange for a radical increase in its eccentricity. To the observer, this appears as a tilting of the path, a celestial wobble that quickly escalates into a violent stretching. Orbits that were once stable and nearly circular are pulled into long, jagged ellipses, thin needles of stone that now pierce the orbits of the inner planets. The clockwork is no longer just failing. It is being repurposed into a kinetic engine of mass redistribution. Imagine the solar system as a vast ancient loom where the threads of planetary paths have been woven into a tight protective tapestry. 3i Atlas is the needle that has entered at a discordant angle, snagging the threads and pulling them taut until they snap. The main belt, a region of space between Mars and Jupiter containing millions of fragments of primordial rock, is the first to suffer the mechanical violence of this exchange. These asteroids, which have remained in their orbit since the dawn of the Sun, are now being nudged by the invisible hands of gravity into the path of the inner sanctum. The Kozai lead-off mechanism does not care for the history of these rocks or the life they might eventually threaten. It is a mathematical proof in motion, a geometric instability that demands a resolution. The redistribution of mass is a cold, mechanical process. As the eccentricity of an asteroid increases, its perihelion, the point at which it is closest to the Sun, begins to drop. One by one, these fragments of the early solar system are hurled inward. They cross the orbit of Mars, then the orbit of the Earth, and finally Venus and Mercury. The inner solar system, once a sanctuary protected by the gravitational shepherds of the outer giants, is now being bombarded by its own history. The shrapnel of our origins has become the herald of our end. This is the kinetic reality of the tilt. The three-dimensional nature of the interaction means that there is no hiding behind the shield of Jupiter. The debris is coming from above and below the ecliptic, falling like a rain of fire from a sky that was once thought to be a ceiling. The physics of this inclination shift is a testament to the indifference of the stars. In the three-body interaction between the Sun, the giant planets, and the intruder, the smaller bodies are caught in a gravitational trap. They are the friction in a machine that is realigning its gears. As the great planets Jupiter and Saturn attempt to compensate for the presence of 3i Atlas, they inadvertently amplify the perturbations felt by the asteroids. The mechanical purity of the Kozai lead-off effect ensures that the total angular momentum of the system is conserved even as the individual paths of millions of bodies are shattered. The system is purging its components, shedding the mass that it can no longer hold in equilibrium. We are witnessing the cosmic equivalent of a machine tearing itself apart, discarding the bolts and gears that have become a liability to its new chaotic configuration. The impact on the main belt is not a single event, but a sustained epoch of destabilization. The reservoirs of cometary material in the far reaches of the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud are also beginning to feel the reach of the Sentinel. The celestial geometry has shifted so fundamentally that the very concept of a stable orbit is becoming a relic of the past. The science of orbital inclination tells us that once the threshold of instability is crossed, the return to order is measured in eons, not years. The long-term increase in impact probability is a mathematical certainty. Every calculation, every simulation run by the few remaining centres of human inquiry points toward the same conclusion. The sky is no longer a silent witness, it is a source of imminent catastrophe. There is a profound sense of human inadequacy in the face of this mechanical violence. Our species has spent centuries mapping the heavens, believing that by understanding the laws of the universe, we could somehow master them. But the Kozai lead-off mechanism is a reminder that knowledge is not control. We can calculate the exact vector of an incoming asteroid with the precision of a master horologist, but we cannot stop the gears of the cosmos from turning. We are observers of a machine that operates on a scale of mass and energy that renders our greatest technologies as insignificant as the dust motes caught in a beam of sunlight. Our preparation is a whisper against the roar of a collapsing system. The debris field created by this redistribution of mass is vast beyond comprehension. Millions of tons of rock and ice are now on collision courses with the worlds of the inner system. The mechanical trap has been sprung. As the orbits continue to tilt and stretch, the friction of the gravitational exchange generates a heat that is not felt in temperature, but in the frantic movement of celestial bodies. The system is in turmoil, a symphony of discord where every note is a potential impact. The indifferent stars look down upon a solar system that is undergoing a violent transformation, a shedding of its old skin in favour of a new, more lethal form. This is the era of the falling sky. The logic of the mass redistribution is inexorable, a consequence of the fundamental laws that govern the dance of matter in the void. As the first of the perturbed asteroids begin their long, lonely journeys toward the Sun, we are forced to accept the cold reality of our position. We are passengers on a world that is being targeted by the very mechanics that once ensured its safety. The abyss has not just reached in, it has rewritten the rules of the game. The machine is grinding its gears and we are caught in the teeth of the exchange. The tapestry of the heavens is unravelling, and in its place a new and terrifying pattern is emerging, one of kinetic danger, mathematical certainty, and the silent, cold majesty of a universe that does not care if we survive the transition. This mechanical trauma is not a transient scar, but a fundamental rewriting of the celestial architecture. We often imagine the vacuum of space as a place of absolute silence and stillness, a void where movements are isolated and inconsequential. But the reality is far more intricate. The solar system is a machine of exquisite sensitivity, a web of gravitational ley lines where every thread is connected to every other. When the Sentinel passed through our local neighbourhood, it did more than just move the furniture of the heavens. It introduced a permanent alteration into the very memory of the machine. This is the concept of orbital memory, the idea that a planetary system carries the record of its past perturbations within the geometry of its current state. Like a bell that continues to ring long after the hammer has struck, the solar system is now vibrating with the resonance of that one, singular encounter. Consider the butterfly effect, but stripped of the atmosphere and the complexity of weather. In the vacuum, this phenomenon takes on a mathematical purity that is both beautiful and terrifying. A nudge of a few millimeters in the position of a planet like Mars might seem insignificant in a system spanning billions of kilometers. However, within the cold logic of celestial mechanics, that small divergence is a seed. Over the course of 10,000 years, it grows. Over 1,000,000 years, it becomes a kilometer. Over 100 million years, it becomes the difference between a stable orbit and a catastrophic collision with the Sun or a neighbouring world. The physics of chaos dictates that once a system is perturbed beyond a certain threshold, it can never return to its original configuration. The original great clock has been dismantled, and in its place, a new and unpredictable mechanism has begun to tick. This shift represents the end of the Newtonian dream. For centuries, the masters of mathematics believed that if we could only know the position and velocity of every particle in the universe, we could predict the future for all eternity. We saw the planets as perpetual motion machines, governed by laws that ensured an eternal return to order. But we now understand that the solar system is a non-linear system, a chaotic engine where the sensitivity to initial conditions is absolute. The passage of the stellar interloper was the ultimate injection of chaos. It was the grain of sand dropped into the delicate turbine of a high-speed jet engine. At first, the machine continues to spin, and the casual observer might notice nothing wrong. But the internal rhythm has changed. A vibration has been introduced into the bearings. The metal begins to fatigue in ways that were never intended by the original design. The turbine is still a machine, but it is no longer the machine it was. It is a device destined for an eventual inevitable failure. The science of this divergence is measured by the Lyapunov time. the time scale over which the future of a system becomes fundamentally unpredictable. Before the encounter, the Lyapunov time of our solar system was measured in tens of millions of years, a comfortable margin for a species whose entire history is but a flicker. But the perturbation has slashed this window of certainty. The mathematics of the long-term evolution of the shifting orbits now points toward a horizon of darkness. We can no longer calculate where the Earth will be in the distant future with any degree of confidence. The orbits have become fluid, drifting through a phase space that is increasingly unstable. The machine is remembering the trauma of the encounter by deviating further and further from its primordial path. The universe is profoundly indifferent to this loss of predictability. To the cosmos, the transition from a stable system to a chaotic one is not a tragedy. It is merely a change in state. The entropy of the vacuum demands that all structures eventually unravel, and the solar system is no exception. We are witnessing the inexorable logic of the perturbation as it ripples through the eons. The planets are now on a journey toward an unknown destination, guided by a gravity that has been permanently warped. The very concept of a home, of a stable world where life can thrive for billions of years, is predicated on the illusion of orbital permanence. That illusion has been shattered. The celestial tapestry is being rewoven by the cold hands of chaos. As we look out into the abyss, we realize that we are the witnesses to a planetary metamorphosis. The solar system is shedding its old identity. The orbits of the outer giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, have been nudged into a new resonance, a discordant symphony that will eventually dictate the fate of the inner worlds. The mechanical record of the passage is written in the eccentricity of every orbit, in the slight tilt of every planetary axis. These are the scars of the interstellar encounter, the silent testimony of a machine that has been broken and rebuilt in a more lethal image. The future of the Earth is no longer a certainty, it is a probability distribution in a sea of chaos. There is a certain melancholic majesty in this realization. We have long sought to find meaning in the stars, to see the heavens as a reflection of divine order or cosmic purpose. But the reality revealed by the butterfly effect in the vacuum is one of pure mechanical necessity. The universe does not care for our maps or our calendars. It does not care if the Earth is ejected into the freezing void or if it is devoured by the sun. The machine simply operates. The gears turn according to the new reality. We are the accidental inhabitants of a mechanism that is in the process of resetting itself, a system that is finding a new equilibrium through a period of violent instability. The persistence of the perturbation is the true legacy of the Sentinel. Long after the star has faded into the distance of the galaxy, its ghost will remain in the math of our orbits. It has left behind a legacy of instability that will outlast the mountains, outlast the oceans, and perhaps outlast the very memory of the human race. We are living in the shadow of a mathematical certainty, the certainty that the world we know is a temporary arrangement, a brief moment of relative calm before the storm of chaos fully arrives. The solar system has become a record of its own trauma, a machine that remembers the day the abyss reached in and touched the gears. In this new epoch, the study of celestial mechanics is no longer an exercise in prediction, but an exercise in archaeology. We look at the orbits not to see where they're going, but to understand what they have lost. We are tracing the remnants of a lost stability, the fragments of a Newtonian dream that has been dissolved by the reality of the chaotic void. The sky is a vast, silent archive of a catastrophe that is still unfolding. Every night, as we look up at the familiar constellations, we are looking at a system that is fundamentally different from the one our ancestors saw. The divergence is subtle now, a whisper in the calculations, but it is inexorable. The tapestry of the cosmos is unravelling, and as it does, it reveals the cold, hard logic of a universe that is constantly reinventing itself at the expense of its previous creations. The machine is moving forward, into a future that is as dark and unpredictable as the abyss from which the Sentinel emerged. This is the beginning of the new history, a history written in the language of permanent change and the mathematical purity of a system that has forgotten how to return home. To understand the ghost that now haunts our celestial neighbourhood, we must cast our gaze far beyond the familiar borders of our ecliptic toward the frozen coordinates of the galactic north. There, in the sprawling complexity of the Milky Way, the origins of this mechanical violence are written in the language of gravity and momentum. This interloper, known in our archives as 3i Atlas, did not emerge from a vacuum of purpose, but from a crucible of absolute indifference. Its journey began eons ago, within a hyperdense binary system, a pair of stellar remnants locked in a lethal high-speed embrace. In this primordial engine, two massive suns spiraled around a common centre of mass, their proximity so extreme that they distorted the very fabric of the surrounding void. This was a place of pure mathematical fury, a machine of such magnitude that the individual fates of planets and moons were nothing more than rounding errors in a grand gravitational equation. The ejection was not a moment of cosmic malice, but a consequence of the ruthless laws of motion. Within the chaotic influence of these two dancing suns, 3i Atlas was once a stable component of a distant architecture, a moon or a small planetoid orbiting in a complex multistellar dance. But the stability of a three-body system is a fragile illusion. As the binary stars drew closer, their orbital energy began to bleed into the smaller bodies surrounding them. The mechanism of the galaxy acted as a colossal slingshot. In a single violent epoch, the intruder was caught in a gravitational resonance that accelerated it beyond the escape velocity of its home system. It was stripped from its tether and flung into the abyss with a kinetic energy that defies human comprehension. This was the mechanical purity of the ejection, a cold, calculated exchange of momentum that sent a world-sized fragment screaming into the interstellar dark at hundreds of kilometers per second. This launch was a singular event in a chain of cause and effect that spans millions of years. For thousands of centuries, 3i Atlas travelled through the interstellar medium, a region of the cosmos so vast and so empty that it resembles a graveyard of light. In this silence, the intruder became a sentinel of the void, a relic of a lost system carrying the scars of its violent birth. The physics of its journey are defined by the cold logic of inertia. Without an atmosphere to erode its surface or a sun to warm its crust, the object remained a pristine record of its original catastrophe. It moved through the darkness not as a wanderer, but as a projectile, its trajectory dictated by the initial conditions of its expulsion and the subtle, invisible tug of the galactic tide. When we compare the clockwork of our own solar system to the binary chaos of the galactic north, the contrast is staggering. Our sun is a solitary, middle-aged star, presiding over a collection of worlds that have enjoyed relative peace for 4,500,000,000 years. We have come to view this stability as the norm, a universal standard of order. But the arrival of the intruder reminds us that our system is merely a small, quiet cog in a much larger and more volatile machine. The Milky Way is a factory of motion, a vast tapestry of interactions where stars are born in clusters, torn apart by black holes or ejected into the intergalactic void. The mathematical probability of such an encounter is vanishingly small when viewed through the lens of a single human lifetime, yet on the scale of the cosmos it is an inevitability. Given enough time and enough matter, the machine will eventually bring two disparate systems into contact. The arrival of 3i Atlas in our vicinity was the result of a calculation performed by the universe over the course of an eternity. The distance it travelled, measured in quadrillions of miles, is a testament to the scale of the galactic engine. As it crossed the heliopause and entered the influence of our sun, it did not recognise our world as a place of life or history. To the intruder, the Earth is merely another mass in a field of masses, another obstacle in a path determined by ancient events. This is the cold reality of interstellar migration. The universe does not operate on a human scale. It operates on the scale of the infinite, where the movement of a moon across the void is no more significant than the vibration of an atom. The mechanism of this encounter reveals a profound truth about our place in the cosmos. We are living within a system that is part of a much larger, much more indifferent architecture. The solar system is not a fortress, but a target of opportunity. The gravity of the hyperdense binary system that birthed the intruder is inexorably connected to the gravity that now tugs at our own planets. We are linked to the galactic north by a chain of kinetic events that began long before the first organisms crawled out of the terrestrial oceans. This is the mechanical majesty of the cosmos, a system where a distant disaster can ripple through the dark and rewrite the history of a world millions of light years away. As we trace the path of the intruder back to its origin, we find no gods and no grand designs, only the silent, eternal turning of the gears. The abyss did not choose us, the machine simply moved. The physics of the origin story for 3i Atlas are a reminder of the fragility of our perceived order. We are the accidental witnesses to a galactic process that treats the destruction of a planetary system with the same lack of emotion as the formation of a crystal. The void is not empty. It is a medium for the transmission of energy and the relocation of mass. The long journey of the intruder through the interstellar dark is a metaphor for the state of all things in the universe. Everything is in motion, everything is falling, and everything is eventually reclaimed by the abyss from which it emerged. The shadow of the binary origin now hangs over our future. We are forced to realize that the stability we cherished was merely a period of low probability. The machine of the galaxy has shifted, and we are caught in the transition. The arrival of the ghost is the beginning of a new perspective, one where we no longer see ourselves as the masters of a predictable domain, but as passengers on a small, vulnerable world that has been brushed by the wing of a passing giant. The mathematical purity of this encounter is its most terrifying aspect. There is no appeal to be made to the laws of motion. There is no negotiation with the momentum of a moon-sized object. There is only the observation of the mechanism as it continues its inexorable work, turning our familiar sky into a landscape of ancient mechanical violence. We are at last truly part of the entire history of the universe, not as its protagonists, but as the collateral remnants of its eternal, unfeeling motion. The silence that has defined our existence for 4 billion years is not a law of nature, but a statistical aberration. We have lived our lives in the brief quiet pulse between two heartbeats of a much larger, more violent machine. To understand the gravity of our current encounter with the intruder, we must first confront the mathematical impossibility of our own history. The great clock of the solar system has ticked, with a terrifying regularity for eons, a period of stability so prolonged and so profound that we began to mistake it for a permanent state of being. We looked at the night sky and saw a cathedral of order, yet we failed to realize that we were merely living inside the gears of a mechanism that had, by sheer chance, failed to crush us. The statistics of this stability are staggering. For more than 4,000 million years, the orbital paths of our world and its neighbours have remained consistent, tracing the same elliptic curves through the void with the precision of a masterwork timepiece. This is the 4 billion year piece, a stretch of time so vast that the human mind cannot truly comprehend its scale. During this epoch, the terrestrial world was allowed to cool, to settle, and to become a sanctuary for the fragile chemistry of life. But this sanctuary was never a sanctuary by design. It was a temporary pocket of low entropy, a fluke in the calculations of an indifferent cosmos. The machine did not intend for us to exist. It simply allowed it through a rare, extended period of mechanical silence. Within this silence, the science of habitability found its footing. We speak of the Goldilocks zone as if it were a warm embrace from the sun, but in the language of the cold machine, it is merely a narrow corridor of thermal equilibrium. It is the specific distance where the energy of a star and the vacuum of the abyss balance one another so perfectly that water may remain liquid and carbon may weave its intricate chains. However, the Goldilocks zone is more than a matter of distance. It is a matter of duration. Life does not merely require the right temperature, it requires that temperature to remain stable for millions of generations. It requires the orbital regularity that we have long taken for granted. If the Earth had been nudged by even a fraction of a degree in its eccentricity during those 4 billion years, the chemistry of the mind would have been unravelled before it ever began. We are the beneficiaries of a mathematical rarity so thin that it borders on the miraculous. Consider the fragility of the carbon molecules that compose the architecture of your own body. They are held together by the weakest of bonds, easily shattered by the radiation of a wandering star or the kinetic impact of a stray moon. In the face of the cosmic mechanism, these molecules are nothing, microscopic remnants of a cooling nebula, drifting through a landscape of ancient crushing forces. Yet, because the gears of our local system remained locked in a steady rhythm, these fragile structures were given the time to become complex. They were given the time to become thinking matter. This is the mechanical requirement for consciousness, a long-term order that defies the chaotic tendencies of the wider universe. The machine had to remain still long enough for the witness to wake up. As we look back at the history of our world, we find that we are the result of a statistical miracle. The probability of a planetary system remaining undisturbed by the violent migrations of gas giants or the intrusion of interstellar ghosts for 4 billion years is infinitesimally small. We have existed in a bubble of safety while the rest of the galaxy was a theatre of catastrophe. Stars were born and died in pillars of fire, galaxies collided and tore one another into ribbons of light, and black holes devoured entire solar systems, yet our small corner of the void remained silent. This silence was the ultimate gift, a period of planetary peace that allowed the transition from simple chemistry to the profound complexity of the human soul. But the cold reality of physics is that the machine is indifferent to the mind it has produced. The laws of motion do not pause to acknowledge the emergence of a witness. Gravity does not soften its grip because it is acting upon a creature that can feel pain or wonder. The stability of the past 4 billion years was never a promise. It was a statistical fluke that has now reached its conclusion. The arrival of the intruder is the signal that the long piece is over, that the gears have shifted, and that the regular motion of the great clock is being disrupted by the inexorable logic of the larger cosmos. We are forced to realize that the order we cherished was a temporary state, a fragile balance of gears that was always destined to be broken. This realization brings us to the existential pivot of our journey. We are the accidental children of a cold machine, the thinking remnants of a system that is now returning to its natural state of violence. The statistical purity of our history is what makes our current predicament so poignant. We are rare not because we are special, but because we are unlikely. We are the anomaly in the data, the exception to the rule of cosmic chaos. The peace of the solar system was a cradle, but the cradle was never meant to last forever. It was a temporary sanctuary provided by the indifference of the mechanism, a place where the soul could emerge from the dust and look out into the abyss. As the intruder moves through our system, it serves as a reminder of the rarity of long-term order. The history of the universe is not a story of progress or purpose, but a tapestry of kinetic events and thermal decays. The stability that allowed for human consciousness was a gift of time, a period of quietude in a symphony of destruction. We are now seeing the mechanism for what it truly is, not a protector, but an architect of life through sheer unfeeling indifference. The machine allowed us to exist by not noticing us, and now it is unmaking our world with the same lack of intent. The meaning of this stability lies in the transition it enabled. We move from the cold logic of habitability to the warm reflection of philosophy. We move from being objects in motion to being subjects that could perceive the motion. This is the paradox of our existence. We are the products of a ruthless mechanical process that has no capacity for thought, yet we have used the time provided by that process to ask why we are here. The mathematical probability of our survival was always low, yet we have endured long enough to witness the very forces that will eventually reclaim us. The machine that allows for the soul is the same machine that will eventually devour it. We stand now at the beginning of the final act. The statistical reflection of our past provides the context for the catastrophe of our future. We are the witnesses to a cosmic event that transcends our understanding of time and scale. The 4 billion year peace was the necessary prerequisite for the mind, and now that the mind has achieved its peak, the peace is being withdrawn. We are the collateral remnants of a galactic shift, the thinking matter that is caught in the gears of a changing universe. The cold truth of the miracle is that it was always temporary. The mechanism continues its work, turning the familiar sky into a landscape of ancient mechanical violence, reminding us that in the entire history of the universe, the only thing more vast than the void is the silence of the machine as it moves from one epoch to the next. The final movement of this cosmic symphony is not a crescendo, but a slow and deliberate fading into the dark. As the gears of the solar system begin to grind against the friction of time, we are forced to confront the reality that the machine which built us is also the machine that will dismantle us. The sun, that primordial sentinel that has stood watch over our world for 4,500,000,000 years, is approaching its final epoch. It is an inexorable process of physics, a transition from the steady, reliable fusion of hydrogen into the violent, unstable consumption of its own core. This is the cold logic of the star. It does not care for the civilizations that rose in its light or the dreams that were whispered under its warmth. It is merely a furnace, and every furnace eventually runs out of fuel. In the distant future, hundreds of millions of years from this moment, the sun will begin to swell. Its outer layers will expand into the void, turning the sky into a furnace and the oceans into steam. This is the catastrophe of the inevitable. The Earth, once a vibrant tapestry of biological diversity, will be stripped bare, its atmosphere unravelled by the increasing intensity of a dying star. From the perspective of the machine, this is not a tragedy. It is simply a shift in the thermal equilibrium, a redistribution of energy across the abyss. But for us, the observers, it is the ultimate dissolution of everything we have ever known. We are the remnants of a system that is returning to its raw, chaotic state, and as the inner planets are devoured by the expanding red giant, we are forced to find meaning in the impending silence. This realization brings us to the true existential pivot of our journey. If the universe is a cold, unfeeling machine, then consciousness is the unexpected vibration of its gears. We are the moment where the mechanism became aware of itself. For billions of years, the cosmos moved in silence, a vast and complex clockwork of gravity and light that had no witness. Then, in one tiny corner of the void, the dust began to think. We are the eyes of the machine, the part of the system that can look back at the gears and understand how they turn. This is our transcendence. We are not separate from the ruthless machine. We are its most remarkable output. By calculating the movement of the stars and predicting the end of our own world, we have achieved a harmony that the blind forces of nature can never possess. We have turned the cold mathematics of our destiny into a story, and in doing so we have risen above the mechanical certainty of our end. The beauty of our existence lies in its fragility. We are a flicker of light in a basement that has been dark for eons and will be dark for eons more. The scale paradox of our lives is that while we are infinitesimally small in space and time, our capacity to witness the universe makes us its equal. The abyss is vast, but it is empty of thought. The void is eternal, but it is silent. Only here, in the brief window of habitability provided by the solar mechanism, has the universe found a voice. We are the narrators of the machine. Even as the sun prepares to consume our cradle, the fact that we can foresee it, name it, and accept it is the ultimate act of defiance against the oblivion that awaits us. As we zoom out from our dying star, we see that our story is but one of trillions. The galaxies themselves are moving toward a state of ultimate decay. The era of star formation will eventually cease, and the lights of the universe will go out one by one. The epoch of the stars will give way to the epoch of the remnants, where black holes and cold cinders are all that remain of the former glory. In this far future, the universe will be a landscape of absolute zero, a place where the concept of heat and life is a forgotten memory. This is the inexorable direction of entropy, the final resting state of the cosmic machine. It is a reality that is both terrifying and sublime. The machine does not stop because it is tired. It stops because the mathematics of the void require it. Yet there is a melancholic optimism to be found in this finality. We have been part of the most interesting period of the entire history of the universe. We existed when the stars were bright, when the elements were heavy enough to form rocky worlds, and when the temperature was exactly right for chemistry to become biology. We were the passengers on the only ship that mattered, during the only season that could sustain us. To have been a witness to this specific moment in the eons is a privilege beyond calculation. We are the soul of the machine, the brief period of reflection before the gears lock and the engine cools forever. The story of the universe is not about us, but we are the only ones who can tell it. Our legacy is not in the monuments we build or the worlds we might colonize, for those too will eventually be reclaimed by the abyss. Our legacy is the act of observation itself. By understanding the mechanism, we have mastered it. We have looked into the mouth of the catastrophe and found the mathematics that govern it. We have translated the silent movements of the cosmos into the language of logic and wonder. Even when the last human mind has ceased to function, and the last star has faded into the eternal dark, the fact that we were here remains a permanent truth in the tapestry of time. The final zoom out reveals a universe that is returning to the void from which it came. The friction of existence is over, and the machine is finally at rest. The great clock has wound down, and the silence that follows is not the silence of a grave, but the silence of a completed work. The mission of the universe, if it ever had one, was to produce the observer. We have fulfilled that role. We have seen the dawn, we have navigated the storm, and we have watched the sunset. The cold reality of the end is nothing compared to the warmth of the knowledge we gained along the way. In the final accounting of the eons, the only thing that truly mattered was that the universe was not alone. It had us. We are the vibration in the gears that refused to be quiet until the very end. We are the spark that illuminated the mechanism for a single, glorious second. As the darkness closes in and the stars drift apart into the infinite abyss, we find peace in the mechanical truth. The machine was cold, but we were warm. The void was empty, but we were full. The universe was blind, but we saw everything. And in that seeing, we have achieved the only immortality that is possible in a world governed by entropy. We have been the witnesses. We have been the light. We have been the story of the entire history of the universe. And now, as the final gear stops turning, we accept the silence with the grace of those who have seen the truth and found it beautiful. The machine is still. The work is done. The end.